next, we are going to look a little bit at the mouth because it's all about, honestly, it all delivers between eye and mouth. That's where you're going to capture likeness. Like we did earlier with the eyes and the eyebrows and the mouth, our little friends over here, it pretty much solves everything. And we'll see what we can do with the mouth here. Very simple. You have to consider, as we were looking last week with the planes of the face, that our mouth could be resolved. And I'm looking at several of the images that you have here. One that I really want to highlight as you look at all these little ones. And notice at the bottom, we have similar things. Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, how you develop from, it looks like ovals and they're just placed. We're going to do that. But if you go up to the middle, you see how it wraps around a cylinder. And sometimes we lose a sense of that. But just right above that, there's a level where you see a mouth in profile. And I'm going to do one really quick one here where this is number 1. If I were doing, in this case, I'm doing the upper lip and the lower lip. And I'm just doing a nice little quick rendering of what would represent a mouth. Here we go. And we have the curvature that goes right into the chin right here. So, and right here we would go right to the nose. But if you can read this as a mouth, when you're in profile, the one thing that I really, number 1, identify this angle. So you want to be able to see this line. And this line, actually, you could begin to play with it because you'll have to deal with the chin, and you would also have to deal with where it starts with the nose. So the line can shift. It could be, but the key is the line like this, or is the line like this? And believe it or not, this, and this is a big shift, I'm exaggerating, but a line that you see like this, but in reality, it's like this, is where we say, why doesn't it look right? It's a little tiny variation in the angle. And these, some of you may say, wait, that looks exactly the same. You could actually measure it. One of these tools, transporter, to tell you exactly it's 2 degrees off. And that, especially with the portrait, is the thing that would throw you off. So here, I want you to remember this line for the mouth that connects somehow, in this case, the upper lip, lower lip, but sometimes from the nose through the chin, gives you pretty much the biggest piece of the puzzle. Now, for the front view of it, I want to kind of do what the exercise is doing here and show you how we would do our line for the mouth. And that's just a general sketch. We would begin by adding the ends or the edges, the measurement. And I'll go over that again like we did last week. And we would divide this in the upper lip into 3 sections, right in the middle and 2 ovals at the sides. And these would be met by just 2, a little bit wider at the bottom. And our brains are so amazing, they could almost begin to, I can already see how this is going to work. And just as the basic structure for lips, we pretty much begin to identify the mouth. And again, the step from here to the next, it's all about how we apply lights and darks. But that's how easy it is. Let me do that again. I'm going to do it a little bit further. We did this last week. Let me just create a quick egg shape right here. So I'm ghosting it. There's my quick sketch for an egg. And last week we said, I need to find the halfway point. I'm going to say it's right there. Usually we push it upwards where this part is a little bit smaller than this one, sometimes a lot. So you want to exaggerate downwards. I could double check that if you guys remember this. And boom, there it is, right in the middle. Now I want to divide this again, the bottom half in middle. That places me at the lower part of the nose, right above the upper lip. So that's where the lower part of the nose, the upper lip, it's going to be in that area. And this I want to divide again into half. Sometimes you can divide it into third to find it more accurately. But like I said before, with portraits, these formulas just get you in the ballpark. Every portrait is so unique that you need to take your measurements. This gets you there. So the key that I wanted to show here is this. This would show me the lower lip, where the lower lip and the chin meets. So right above it, the distance that I need to find is right about here. And notice that as soon as I do that, you guys are starting to see something. And I know what you see, a portrait. So when I take my measurements for the eyes, and these would be my eyes right here. I'm kind of going to that, how we developed the skull, remember? If you guys remember that. So what I want to point you to here is this. The edges of the mouth. And again, this is just a formula that does not, I would say 98, 99% of the time would work. Maybe some say 95% of the time. You might find that 100% of the time. Or you might find that, no, it doesn't really work for me. So it's if it works for you, then it becomes your formula. But this, to find the edges of the mouth, you simply line them straight up with your pupil, with the center of the eye. That's where it would line up. So I'm drawing these lines here a little bit darker so you guys would see that. So there's an eyeball right there and one right here. In order for us to find the distance, the edges of the mouth, usually they line up, if you were to draw a vertical line, right with the center of the eyes. And then, of course, our nose is right here, and there's our mouth. That's how we would find it. What we do then is to develop the structure of the mouth. So let's go to our next slide, and we're going to develop a mouth in the same steps. So you can have it, if you still have space in this page, it would be nice to develop a page where you can have all of these as reference and always look back and help you kind of develop a process where you can continue exploring and always add to see how you figure them out. Because that's what it's going to be. It's you figuring them out. If you're drawing from life, how would I figure out knowing these basic rules or formulas that we're looking at here? So we're going to start with a line. And again, I'm suggesting that, okay, we did our measurement. This is the edges of the mouth. I'm going to make them a little bit darker at the edges. And that's a big tip because they curve. Remember, we're almost looking at it on a cylinder. The problem here is we always tend to think of these as flat. And they are flat on a paper. But for us to create the illusion, we want to make it seem as if it was curving on that plane. Next, here we're suggested to find the center. See, this is a different formula. I hardly ever use this one. So you would be suggested to find the center. The one I want to point you to here is it kind of skips it, but I'm adding it. You're going to add 1, and that would depend on the size of the upper lip. If you make it too big, you're going to have a big lip. If you make it too small, they're very tiny lip. So you want to make sure you get the sense of the size of that, and then you're going to connect that with 2 ovals. One to this side and one to this side. Once you have that, you're going to do just 2. So at the upper lip, we have 1, 2, 3. One that's a circle, 2 ovals at each side. In the lower, we're going to have two ovals. And the ovals could get a little bit wider in the middle. So this egg shape would be narrower, not necessarily an oval, but it would get wider maybe at the edges. And there you go. So if you could see that, let me zoom in just a little bit so you guys could see it better. So that's how I would start this. So you have circle, two ovals at each side, and then at the bottom, just two larger ovals. From here is where I begin to develop those lines. Now that I have that, I can begin to see not just the proportion and the roundness, but the roundness of it. So as I come to the middle, there's the indentation, and then the proportional roundness to the other side. And at the bottom, we see not just what happens at the bottom, but what's going to happen here in the middle of the mouth as well. So I begin to ghost these and make them a little bit darker. Now I want to draw the line as it curves and follows some of these shapes into the center of the mouth. So we have that middle one right here, crucial, which gives us just enough overlap to give the mouth personality. And there will be somewhat of a breaking plane here that goes upwards and sometimes rounder or sometimes a little bit sharper. Especially if, if not necessarily, but if you're a man or a woman, there are subtle differences. So we draw the middle line, and now we begin to see the planes at the bottom. So I'm dividing the bottom into three, which would be kind of the center, which faces forward, and then these two that pull away. And as I develop this, now I'm going to follow the third. So I'm somewhat between the second and the third box that we're following here. And I'm going to add all of the shading as they did on this side. So as soon as I add a little bit of light and shadow to this, we should begin to see this is how you do it. A little bit of form, the rounding of it. But the way you see this easier is by breaking it into planes. Now this lower part of the upper lip, all of it, because it rounds inward as well, is going to have somewhat of a lower shadow curving into the opening of the mouth. And this would kind of repeat right here at the lower lip if you're going away from the light. Now what happens here with the curvature of the chin and with the indentation that takes us up into the nose. And from this point forward, it's all about what lines to leave in, what lines to leave out in order to capture that likeness. But it's simple as that. And again, practicing. My recommendation, if I were to give homework, would be to look in the mirror and draw your own mouth, draw your own eye. Look at someone and draw their mouth, their eye, and keep practicing by looking at images. The closer, the better the reference, the more you're going to be able to see a lot of these lines, a lot of these details that you're going to choose to select to put in or leave out until you're satisfied with the likeness of your drawing. We're going to do one more, and it's going to be perfect timing, which is going to be a profile. And for the profile, I mentioned looking and finding the angles of those lines. So this is one that I'm going to say it again. You could, if you wanted to, use a ruler almost. Some of these lines you could just find, and I'm going to start it off really just by ghosting a couple of lines that are going to be somewhat near the sample here. Just copying some of these angles. So there you go. Just like that. That's what I have there. Then here, somewhere in the middle, I'm going to have a line that goes this way. It's a little bit darker right here at the edge. And then I need this angle and this lower angle. And from here, you just begin to round and polish. See the curvature. But the most important thing is finding these angles. So these lips, as I said before, most of the time, the line would kind of have this type of inclination here, with the upper lip being a little bit more forward than the lower lip. And there you go. You begin to curve it, develop it, connect the lines, maintain the roundness. Consider how the volumes, as we did before with the 3 ovals at the top, somehow seeing them here sideways might be helpful, maybe not. Sometimes you want to stick to simpler lines as you see them. And begin to add the shading. So I just skipped all the way to number 3. Because I was pretty secure, pretty sure the lines were captured early on. Now I'm seeing where my darks are supposed to be, all underneath the upper lip and at the lower part of the lower lip. Some lines just hinting at crossing shadows here, and not much detail. If you wanted to continue here and maybe hint at how the nose is preparing to curve up. It just becomes about that, about how you develop the amount of detail that you want to add to your portrait. But for the most part, that would solve it for me. Now, yes, the lines could be a little bit cleaner. This might be too sketchy. And yeah, I would generally keep my lines much lighter at the early stages so it's not so messy, so overlapped. But you could always use all these different techniques. Notice my grip and notice how fast, just by adding different types of quality of line, we could really develop the illusion. And knowing how some of these planes, as I was mentioning last week, would be treated by the light. If they're direct, then they'll be a lot lighter. If they're away from it, they're going to be in shadow. There you have it. And now we're dealing with how to develop skin texture. It's always going to be about almost always, going all the way back to basics, which is how I choose to hold my pencil and develop that skill. So that looks like a good page for one day. I try to squeeze in a lot of information because we only have 4 sessions. So this week we did eyes and mouth. Next week we're going to do nose and ear. And for the final week, we will be able to do a portrait or self-portrait. Put it all together. So I'm going to end it here. And if you guys have any questions or if you want to show me some of your work, I would love to see it.